Welcome to Super Fun Game Review Podcast Go. A look at modern and retro games with a dark sense of humor. Introducing your hosts, Steve.
Well, I'm a wreck now.
Harry.
Put it in my mouth.
Clark.
That man had one testicle and hit home runs, goddammit.
And Joe.
This went off the rails very quickly.
Let's start the show.
Welcome back to another episode of Super Fun Game Review Podcast Go! All right, so to my virtual left, Joe.
Push your fingers through the surface and into the wet.
Oh, God.
Nice. To my other virtual left, Steve.
I can tell you are not a yesterday grouse's son.
To my further virtual left, John.
I got nothing on that. I didn't know I had to prepare anything.
Oh, my God.
That's
Come on, man.
First time listener. That's fine.
Yep.
And always my virtual bottom, Harry.
The fridge is doing something.
And I will be your host tonight, Clark. Despite what you may have heard, HRAs are not monitoring devices. We're not tracking your movements or listening to your conversations while you are wearing them. We do that regardless of whether you're wearing an HRA.
Oh, it's too real.
It's very real.
There's a lot in this game that was too real.
All right, guys. Before we get into initial impressions, I wanted to say that this episode is brought to you by Deep Creek Glassworks. Since 2013, Deep Creek Glassworks has been handcrafting durable glass goods for everyone to enjoy. Looking for something awesome for yourself or maybe for a loved one? Ornaments, jewelry, glassware, and much more. Deep Creek Glassworks has you covered. Feel free to contact them for something custom that you don't see on their website. Visit deepcreekglassworks.com. That's works, W-O-R-X, today to check out their selection. And for our listeners, if you use the Superfun promo code, you will get 10% off your first order. All items are shipped in crush-resistant boxes and provide free shipping on orders over $50. Again, that's deepcreekglassworks.com. Works spelled W-O-R-X.
You just got a couple glasses from them. They looked pretty good.
Yeah, they're fantastic. They're great. I did in fact get two really nice beer glasses from Deep Creek. It's awesome.
Very nice.
And he tried to And just to let you know how much of a good guy he is, he tried to let me use the discount code. Like, he was like, oh, well, you get like 10% off. You're like a part of the podcast. I was like, nah, dude, I'll pay full price. Don't worry about it.
Yep.
I refused the discount.
Please don't pay as much. I want to pay as much. Okay, I guess I will.
Yeah, all right. I pretty much told him, I was like, look, if you're not going to take the extra 10%, like, and let me pay regular price, I'm going to tip you at least the price. So
we have a good relationship.
yeah, absolutely. All right, so the game for today is Control, made by Remedy Studios. So let's get into initial impressions.
My first initial impression was browsing through the PlayStation Store and then just seeing, I don't know, colors that struck my interest. So I went over it and then I watched the trailer for it. I'm like, oh shit, this looks like a fun game. I'm going to have to keep this in mind. And then not 3-4 weeks later, it was brought up for the podcast. I'm like, oh, perfect timing. Here we go. So I was looking forward to it because I already had a previous interest, never heard of it before that, and here we are.
All right, John, what's your initial impressions?
Sure. I think I played this game before any of you guys. I played this probably 4 or 5 months ago. And I was interested in it because I was a huge fan of Alan Wake, which is also made by Remedy. So, it was on my radar when it came out and then picked it up. Recommended it to a couple of you guys after I played through it, and now you guys reviewed it and you told me to be here, so I didn't know what else to do on a Friday during quarantine, so here we are.
You're spending it with 3 out of 4 of your closest friends, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, 50%'s not bad.
Took that down even more.
You can pick them.
All right, Joe, initial impressions.
I had never even heard of this game until you recommended it, honestly. I never played Alan Wake prior to this and kind of knew the story of that game, but that was about it. Like I said, I'd never really heard of it. Even downloaded it, booted it up. I didn't look at any reviews or trailers or anything. I had no idea what I was getting into. Was excited that it was, a third-person shooter because those are always pretty fun for me.
All right. How about you, Harry?
Yeah. So when I originally saw this trailer, I think I was just I don't know, searching through the PlayStation Store, just looking for something new. I saw the trailer to this, and initially I was not impressed. I thought it looked very simple and not really interesting. But for the podcast, I will say I do like the company Remedy. I don't know. I really like everything that they have to offer, and we'll get into this later, but some of the elements from past games made its way into this game, and that really sparked an interest for me while playing this game. I got to say, at first, I really compared this game to the game Prey that we played, I'm guessing like 2 years ago. It felt very similar on a lot of levels. But as the story developed, it started kind of going down its own route. But yeah, that's kind of initially what I thought of the game.
Huh. I could see that comparison.
For sure. All right, so this is a game that I brought to the table. I did pick this up at launch when it came out, and had played through a decent chunk of it, and then replayed it for the podcast again here. And I had immediately fallen in love with this game because I was in the middle of watching through season 3 of Twin Peaks, and if you are at all aware of like Twin Peaks and like X-Files and stuff like that, it's like FBI, government agencies involved in supernatural happenings and things like that. So it just, at the time, it was like a perfect game that just happened to come out. I've always been a fan of Remedy, the Max Payne games and the Alan Wake game. So this just, fell right into my lap while I was already into that kind of subgenre, the new weird or whatever. So I immediately was like all about this game. So I brought it to the podcast.
Thanks for that.
All right, speaking of segments, let's get into the next one. Let's get into some game development.
Game development.
All right, does anyone have any development? I have some notes that I wanted to go over about the development and the world that they kind of craft here.
Remedy.
Yeah, you got it, Clark. Take the next 4.5 minutes uninterrupted. If you break your stream of consciousness, the refrigerator is going to eat me. So.
All right, so it's the same studio that originally made the Max Payne games that were actually published by Rockstar, and they made Alan Wake. Darling in the game is the actor and voice of Alan Wake, and Trench is voiced by the same person that did Max originally. Sam Lake, who was the main creative director and writer for Alan Wake, was also this game's writer and creative director. And one thing that I noticed that was really interesting about it was the Bureau. They started with actually making lore and mythos about the Bureau of Control before they started with the story. So like they didn't have Jesse as a character until after they had created the Bureau. And I think that shows so much in this game, because of how just in-depth they get with the creativity there.
That makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, and I'll tell you why when we get to story.
I wanted to cover some of the links that I had found between Control to Alan Wake and Max Payne. I just wanted to get into those in development because I thought those would be interesting talking points here. So this is all gathered mostly through the collectibles that you find in the game. So the Federal Bureau of Control reboots the TV show Night Springs from Alan Wake to introduce the public to paranormal concepts, so that when people see them, they report them as opposed to just dying from, like a crazy accident. They're like, oh, wow, this is weird. I need to report this. So then the Bureau can come in. They kind of like retconned an item from the Alan Wake games into an altered item as well. All the thermoses that you collect in Alan Wake are actually now considered altered items via the Federal Bureau of Control, the FBC. And I thought that was kind of interesting because they were like, oh, this has like a very small power that we don't feel the need to actually collect on our own. It's that any coffee at any time that you put into it stays hot forever. So it's hot, fresh coffee for as long as that is in the thermos, which I thought was kind of like a funny little like
as
nod
long
to...
as you keep it. Doesn't have unlimited coffee. It just keeps coffee.
No, it's if you put coffee in it, you could open that thing up 4 years later, it'll be hot and fresh.
I need that in my life right now.
Same.
It's a Yeti.
Absolutely. So in that same document, they directly mention Alan Wake as being one of the prime candidates with Jesse Faden, and also that the AWEs happened at Cauldron Lake, the Altered World events, like the same thing that happened at Ordinary and the same thing you're kind of chasing down in Control. They confirmed that like all of that is in this world together. Dylan references the writer. He says, in one world, there's a writer who wrote a story about a cop. In another world, the cop was real. The cop in the stories is real in another world, and that's Max. And Alan makes a living off of writing these crime dramas about a cop. What was another interesting little thing, and this is my last little note in development, is the IP of Alan Wake was actually purchased by Remedy a year or two ago, which brings us to the upcoming DLC for Control, aptly named AWE, which is confirmed that has Alan Wake in Control. So you will see Alan Wake in the game, which pretty much just pulls the entire universe together of what they're trying to do and be like, hey, we have this giant grand universe now.
Just to speculate on that, though, I doubt they purchased the rights just for a DLC, though.
No, they didn't. They did it so that they can resell Alan Wake on Steam and stuff.
Okay.
Because Microsoft took it all down because there was a dispute over the license, and then Remedy purchased it, and that's why people are able to buy Alan Wake again on Steam. I haven't checked to see if it's there, but I know that it was down for a while, and you couldn't even purchase new copies for Xbox and things like that.
I bought it on Steam like Monday.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
It might just be the giddy child in me, but I feel like they're doing like a Marvel Universe play kind of thing, like where they're doing these individual stories that might be a part of a bigger picture later.
The RGU, the Remedy Games universe.
Oh shit!
I think your other analogy that you brought up the other day, Harry, is better.
Okay, well, talking about
Shyamalan.
Yeah, I forget the name
Unbreakable,
of
Glass, and whatever the fuck the other one is.
the middle one.
Split.
Unbreakable, Split, and Glass.
Yeah. So I guess to rehash that conversation, I was saying that like Unbreakable was its own movie, and then Split was technically its own movie, and then they sprinkled Unbreakable in the end of Split to allude to this final big project.
That's not actually true. So Unbreakable was originally supposed to have the bad guy from Split in Unbreakable. And Mr. Glass was supposed to be like a longer thing, but Shyamalan didn't know whether or not they were going to get another movie. So
Well, as it appeared to us, though, that's what I'm saying that they might be going for.
I'm saying that Shyamalan had the plan for it. Not that it was a good plan, but he had a plan for it the whole time.
If they're going to make it work, I think they need to make a big push to try to get the Max Payne license from Rockstar. That's probably the biggest point that they would need to have contention to make this really work. Because I want to see Max Payne in a world if they're going to put it all together. I think it kind of falls apart if they can't get all three pieces in there. I know they have like the Quantum Break thing, but like Microsoft has that all wrapped up too, which apparently they allude to that game as well. I'm unfamiliar with it though, as I don't own like an Xbox that I would play that on. So
I would imagine that would take a considerable amount of money to purchase that from Rockstar.
I don't know. Rockstar has been pretty vocal about them not interested in making any more sequels for Max Payne, and I don't think it sells that well.
I mean, for anything
they
ever,
have their cash cow.
Yeah, they're just going to make GTA 5 for the rest of the time.
Yeah, just keep updating online. GTA 6? No.
GTA
This is
no.
GTA 5 Online 6.0.
To build on your conversation, though, Clark, so 2 other bullet points I had similar to what you were listing. There is a segment where you find a recording that talks about her favorite poet being Thomas Zane, but he actually doesn't exist in this world, or not as a poet. So that's kind of alluding to some events that took place in Alan Wake. We should mention that Old Gods of Asgard exist in this world as well.
Yes, they're the song that plays while you're going through the ashtray maze, which we will get into.
Absolutely. So a big part of like the architectural design in this game, that there's a huge article on this online, but they got their inspiration from brutalist architecture. Which
no. So that's the
But
thing.
you're going to say brutal legend. I was like, what?
No. So brutalist architecture is pretty common. Brutalist architecture is pretty common in government buildings. So a lot of the buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s for the U.S. government use that big concrete block design. That brutalist architecture was very popular during that time frame. It's why a lot of government buildings now, you can tell that they're government buildings because nobody else builds that way. That brutalist architecture is actually a thing that is common in the government workplace.
But no, it had like lots of large blocky objects. So they wanted to be able to show off like some of these fight scenes, and when you're throwing things against the walls and everything, you could just see like the chaos that erupted from some of these fights. It really helped with a lot of the lighting in the game, and I'm going to talk about that more in graphics later.
Well, and it makes sense thematically. Not only because it's a government building, but it's just they're trying to be the most boring thing possible, like the Bureau, right? So it's like how do we contain all this weirdness? Well, if we just make everything around it super duper boring, maybe we'll be okay.
Hiding in plain sight. All right, guys, let's roll into story.
Story.
Jessie Faden walks into an ominous and seemingly empty Bureau of Control building. She has been tracking the location for months in search of her brother Dylan, using an alien being known as Polaris. After meeting Ati the janitor, who seems to know more than he leads on, he directs her to the director's office for her interview. Curious, she enters the room to find the old director lying dead on the floor, and upon picking up the gun he uses to blow his brains out, is transported to the astral plane to meet the board of directors. Jessie becomes the director and finds out about the FBC's biggest current problem, the Hiss. From there, she sets on a path to delve deep into the pit of the ever-moving and changing building, fighting the Hiss at every turn. She uncovers objects of power, each containing a power for her to unlock and use as she goes deeper into the void that is the building. Upon finding her brother, she realizes that she must cleanse the slide projector, an altered item that led to all the events up until now, the incident in their hometown Ordinary, the arrival of Polaris, the capture of her brother by the FBC, and their attempt to turn him from Prime Candidate 06 into the new director. Ati hands her a cassette player, which allows her to navigate the ashtray maze, a room designed to block any access into the slide projector's area. Polaris and Jessie are invaded by the Hiss, seemingly trapping her in her own mind. There, she learns that the former director Trench was indoctrinated by the Hiss on an expedition into the slide projector's alternate dimensions. He stole a second slide and used it to bring the Hiss into our world. Once breaking free from her mind prison, she uses the slide projector to go into the astral plane and stop the Hiss and her indoctrinated brother from taking over the board of directors. The only countermeasure the board has is to give Jessie near unlimited power to defeat the Hiss and cleanse the Hiss out of her brother. Once completed, Dylan falls into a coma, and Jessie, acting as the new director, swears to eradicate the Hiss and to restore the Bureau.
Well done.
Thank you.
I have comments about the ending. Does anybody else, or at least the presumed ending?
Let's just skip right to the end.
I gave us the bones that we're going to build upon, so let's go for it.
So the scene where after you complete Polaris and it just looks like she's being overtaken by the Hiss, I took that as the ending, and actually Morgan watched me play a good bit of this game too. We both just sat there on the couch and said, what the fuck? Really? That's it? That's how it ends? And then going into like the monotonous office work, and then they kind of, I don't know, I liked how it left you in suspense a little bit and left you a little well, at least for me, left me a little pissed off. Like, the fuck is going on? And then you just have to wait, and then you see the credits start to distort, and then the text just gets all funky, and then all of a sudden you're playing again, and it's like another hour ish to like of playthrough. And I kind of like the, well, it's funny, we talked about Shyamalan, the little twist where it's like, fuck, this is done, that's it, oh no, there's more. Oh, okay, I feel satisfied with this ending.
Yeah, this game goes from being what seems like it's going to be like very procedural to being like a David Lynch fucking fever dream. It's amazing. Like I love the fake ending, and then you're just like, oh cool, like is this like just some weird thing that they put in the end? Like, oh yeah, we have replayability at the end of the game. You just do these monotonous tasks over and over again, and then the cracks start to show, and like you said, it's just it's a really awesome way to bring you back.
Yeah, like I felt through the majority of the game that I was going to find out the ones that are working for the Bureau were going to end up being the enemy. And I mean, there's a lot of games where it's like, oh, I'm helping this organization, you know, they're feeding me information, we're working towards this task, and then they just turn on you. But to find out that it really isn't that, I'm like, oh, that still took me by surprise, so I can still appreciate it.
Yeah, this game strays from anything that is super obvious right off the bat. I'll say, like you kind of you start to think you understand how the game is going to play out a few times, and then it just is completely like, oh yeah, no, there's this weird fucking mold that you like can't access, or oh hey, like Ahti, who is a janitor, might actually be a higher director than the director themselves and things like that. Like, it's really interesting. I like, it was refreshing. I thought the story was very refreshing.
Yeah, it's like you could assume, you can assume what's going to happen because you played, you know, like dozens of other games that kind of follow that same kind of storyline trope. And then they just throw a curveball, and it's not necessarily what you think it was going to be. It's like,
speaking of curveballs, here's one for you. I think the story is the weakest part of this entire game. I love everything about the setting. I think that the universe they're trying to build is brilliant, but the characters, other than the ones that are already dead, are not interesting at all. I can't say enough how much I don't like either Jesse or the brother. I think all the other kind of security characters are kind of meh.
The side characters like Emily and Marshall were just fucking annoying.
Yeah. So like for me, like the best part about this game is the Bureau of Control itself. The setting is the game. The side characters are fine, but the main characters in this game are just not interesting. Trench is more interesting. What's his name? The scientist, I'm blanking on his name. Darling is way more interesting than anybody else on screen.
Layton or something, like the security dude, the guy that's holed up like down in the one basement.
For me, the main characters of the story, you know, Jessie just doesn't appeal to me at all, and her brother's even worse. I don't know if I'm alone in that. But that's just how I feel.
No, I don't think you are. I mean, like, I'll agree with you on that. Like, I didn't play the game to find out what happened with Jesse per se or Dylan per se. It was more, like you said, way more interesting to find out the history and the lore of the Bureau itself.
Exactly.
And it's kind of like the world and less character development, really. And a lot of that was not only through the gameplay itself, but as Clark alluded to, the collectibles in this game like actually gave a lot to it, which generally I kind of skip a lot of that shit in games where like you just pick up 600 fucking collectibles throughout the game. But right from the beginning, they were the interesting part. So I actually like stayed with it and made sure I read like pretty much everything I picked up.
Yeah, I think part of it was the delivery system, or how they fed you the information. I think could have used a lot more work, where the actual overall story of what it is interesting. But the one thing that really, I don't know, that really stood out, that bothered me, that there was so much like inner monologue where Jesse is talking to like the Polaris are like her inner thoughts. And it's like, and that's the way it's like, oh, well, they don't really know, but they're going to find out. I'm like, I don't know, that here and there maybe, but being like the majority of her dialogue for the most part, that got really old really quick for me.
I want to tap into that real quick. That's why I kind of was saying something about like a David Lynch thing. If you've ever watched Twin Peaks, there's an outward version of the normal main character Cooper in that, where how he portrays himself to everyone else. He also has a tape recorder that he's talking into to another agent in the FBI named Diane. And that is where you start to kind of see more of his inner monologue. And that's like a weird thing that I felt like they were trying to emulate, but kind of fell short with like her inner monologue. I did kind of like that she was talking to Polaris, and I think she's not the worst character here by far, but like Dylan's bad. He also only has like 35 seconds at any given time of like actual him being him. So like he's just fucking crazy and indoctrinated the entire time. So I kind of dismiss him. He's more the bad guy in the game than anything else, and he's kind of an uninteresting body for the Hiss. But I will say I mostly agree with you, John, that like the characters aren't the strong point of the story. However, I think Ahti is actually a really interesting character. Mostly because you don't quite understand what his role in all of this is, but he also seems like the most powerful person in the bureau. Yeah, he is just shrouded in mystery, and it seems like he can at will, without having the gun to travel to the astral plane, like move astral planes, move the building to his whim. Like, it's kind of an interesting whole thing that like, oh, the janitor has the keys to everything. So, and it's a really interesting dynamic for him.
So I actually read a theory about his character is that he's actually the building. So he's actually an extension.
I like that.
He's actually an extension of the building.
See, I thought he was the human embodiment of the board of directors. I thought that's why he was so weird. He's like 7 or 8 different people to represent the board of directors, and then he's like the embodiment of them, which, because it's the astral plane and the astral plane is tied into the building, it kind of, both of our theories kind of mesh together in that, like, yes, he's part of the building because he's part of the board, or he's like the embodiment of the board in the building, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with the building theory. Just based on the little bit of the first DLC that I played, seems to be mostly about him, and it's called the Foundation, where it basically all takes place in the foundation of the building. So that theory seems to.
I need to dive in more to that. I'm very excited. I've been saving all of my DLC stuff for when the new one comes out, because I'm just gonna.
It's almost as long as the regular game, so I wouldn't wait long.
Jesus Christ!
Really?
Yeah, the first DLC alone is 8 hours.
That's a good DLC.
Wow, that's awesome. The DLC was on sale for the expansion pass for like $15, and you get both expansions. So if that's the case, like, that's a steal.
So my thoughts real quick while I can get a word in. So I agree with a lot of the points. And I had a really hard time pinpointing like what about the story was driving me nuts, because yes, while I agree some of the characters fall flat, I did like some of the characters like Ahti, Arish. I think he was the maintenance guy. I think there was 1 or 2 other characters that I found interesting, but I had a real hard time with Jesse. There was something about that character, and what I think one minor thing that drove me nuts the entire time I was playing, her character model looks a lot like the mother of Hannah Baker in 13 Reasons Why. And that bothered me. For some odd reason, that bothered me the entire time. But her motives for being there and like all the questions, like with her being there, it just kind of getting to what you were saying, Steve, with that inner monologue. Sometimes I think it was a little much, and it didn't match the tone of what was going on. I don't know, just something felt very out of place, and I'm still having a hard time putting my finger on it. But something is lacking with the story here.
Having trouble putting your finger through the wet?
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sorry,
When I
don't-
heard that, I was just like, "Oh my god!"
Is it putting your finger? It was like, what the fuck did you just say?
Yeah, and that was like the second, like when you finally meet Dylan and he's like in that thing, like he's in that glass chamber or whatever.
Yeah,
I think that was like the third time maybe that like you could talk to him, because like it seemed like you could just keep talking to him for a long time.
oh yeah. I mean, there's a
I
few.
think I talked to him like 5 or 6 times before I left.
Yeah. Though I will say the way they captured like him kind of being like deranged and completely overtaken, like was done well. Like when he was like behind the glass wall, I don't think was that when you were he may have been back there when you were the office worker and then you went back and some of the lights went dim and then you're like, "Oh, what the hell's going to happen here? Is like he going to pop out of the glass or something else?" Like yes, and actually, you know what? It's funny you were talking about the again M Night Shyamalan, but Split. Like he just kind of had like where he would like fluctuate back and forth a little bit, and he kind of had the same kind of character model, where it's just like bald, shaved head anyway, and just kind of like mentally unstable, even though he was taken over by this completely different entity. But I at least think the direction that they wanted to take him, they did well with it. I feel like he could have played a little bit bigger of a part, or at least more to where it's not just he just pops up every once in a while, and then in the very end you have to go save him. I mean, granted, it's her brother, but still, it's like give the guy a little bit more, like maybe a little more backstory, unless I just missed some of that.
I mean, outside of them using the projectors, it wasn't much other than that.
No, I mean he was P6. All right, so he came from the same line, and then all right, well then there were the two children, and they went in and found this thing, and then okay, here we are.
Yeah, and they didn't really
Felt lacking
with the amount of context they add to some other characters with some of the items that you pick up and some of the stuff that you can read. Dylan's really kind of under fleshed out versus some of the other characters. I will say one of the living characters that I actually enjoyed a lot because he's just very much he cracked me up was Langston. He's the director.
Yeah, that was the name I was looking for.
Panopticon director.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's fantastic too.
Because he's just like the most typical government employee in the world. He's like, I'm just here to get through 35 years and like collect my pension. But meanwhile, he's got a fridge that eats people. And it's just like he goes about it all with such normalcy. He's just like, I don't know. Stuff happens. We're in this room, so we're okay, I guess. Like it's so like, off-putting because he's just so calm about the whole thing. And it's just like everybody else is like,
yeah, we lost a bunch of these things that like can alter someone's life permanently or maim them. Could you just go find them? Like they're around. I think I saw them here.
yeah, he just doesn't care.
That was the best thing after doing the fridge mission.
Can we just talk about the fridge for a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
It was one of my favorite parts of this game. Going along with the world building, and I'll elaborate on this in a minute, but the fridge segment of the game, I think, was the highlight for me, and it's what I'm going to remember the most from this game. Because you pass by this guy on your way to go find your brother, and you hear this guy yelling for help in a room where he's just staring at a fridge, and then they start throwing like some subtle details of how it's the only way to contain it is to keep eyes on it or it's going to move, and how this guy has been sitting in here with his eyes on it, not blinking for a day. And then when you get to Langston, he's like, oh my God, I forgot about Phil. One of my favorite lines in the game.
Oh my God, I forgot about it. He's been staring at that for like a whole day. It's like, yeah, the man's going insane.
So even when I turned this game off, I was thinking about this segment of the game. And I'm like, well, why do they just have one person on duty? How often do they typically rotate? Why don't they have like a whole room of people? How long has this been going on? And this fridge has been like eating at my soul when I'm away from this game.
I mean, did you do the side mission?
Where you go in, right? Is that what
I didn't do it. I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Okay, so you missed the best line in the game then, Joe. So when you go up to it, you finally beat that one mission, and then you can go back and do the side missions. And you're going into the room, and just as you're about to open the door to relieve Phil of duty, he has the greatest line in the way he delivers it, and he's just like, "The fridge is doing something," and then you just hear like this like rustling in the room, and you open the room, and like he's gone.
No, there's blood.
But it's like it's a boss with like a giant eye. Was there blood?
Yeah, there's just blood. Yeah.
You had to look at the blood, and then you would get damaged because you weren't looking at the fridge.
Correct.
Oh, that's funny.
Correct.
I felt so bad for him on that mission because you're already running away saying, "Hey, I'll be back," and then you run back to him and you hit the intercom, and then you're like, "Philip, I'm here. I'm going to help." He's like, "Jesse, that you? Oh, thank God. Thank you." So bad.
Well, cool thing about the mechanic there is you do have to keep eyes on it. If you turn your back to the fridge, it starts doing damage to you over time.
Yeah.
So you have to commit to that enemy at that point and hop into the fridge.
Yeah, and
it's a giant eye.
yeah, and the way that
the
way that Langston reacts to the whole situation is just like what makes his character so great is that he's really just a terrible guy because he's not evil, he's just lazy. Right? He got the job because his dad worked for something, and like he was like, I just want to get a solid job. So it's obviously like some senator's like idiot son, you know, who they sent to the Bureau of Control. And he's way out of his depth, right? And like he's just like, well, I guess we'll figure this shit out. But he never puts himself at risk, so he's just sitting there. That character in that area is just brilliantly written, and it's one of the only characters, like, other than, you know, I feel bad for Phil, but Phil's dead, you know, so there's really just not a lot left.
Well, even when you deliver the news and you're like, it's like, what about Philip? It's like, Philip's gone. Oh, that's a shame. So the next thing,
everybody in the Bureau is just so like desensitized to losing people at this point. It's just like it's like an endless factory of government minions that they just like throw into this building, and eventually something kills them, and then they just have to send more people in, like, you know, because it's just, there's so much danger in there, and it's just so boring otherwise. That's what I think is so great about the setting, is like it's just this boring office building, but then like the thermos, you know, keeps your coffee hot forever, and the fridge will kill you, you know, like, and that's what I think makes the game interesting, because it's certainly not the characters.
There was two other world building events in the game that I think really made this story, well, not the story, but the world shine. The one was, it's kind of early in the game when you get to the furnace, and there's like this recording about how this lady has to keep feeding this furnace, and she just like hears voices, and I don't know, she just continuously feeds this thing, and it just makes this inanimate thing feel so alive. And then it actually didn't do anything at any point in the game for me. I think it was just all in her head.
If you throw bodies into the furnace, something happens. If I remember correctly, you get an item out of it, and it does like a light show kind of thing where the furnace like it reacts. It's actually an object of power, but it's so yes, she wasn't just hallucinating that.
Okay, and towards the end of that recording, she was alluding to feeding it bodies as well. Like, a very subtle comment, but it was definitely made there. The other one, if you did the mirror side quest where everything's reversed, including your speech, I thought that was a cool segment of the game, because you don't realize what's going on at first until you get to the other world, and you can hear this lapse in communication because each person is hearing the opposite of what should have been said. It was just a really crazy segment of the game.
That sounds interesting.
Did you play the recording on both sides?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool way to kind of like, he's not answering her questions at all. He's just trying to be like, I don't know what's happening to me. Like, help.
Now,
I went into the mirror.
Yeah, what weirds me out though is, so when he went into the mirror, he was reversed, but when he came back, he was still reversed. And that, I guess because maybe he didn't deactivate it, or
I think it implies that his doppelganger killed him. and then the doppelganger came back.
Yeah, that's what I kind of inferred from that as well.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, I didn't play it because I did not manage my time for all the side quests. But if it was the doppelganger, wouldn't it be speaking normally when you were in there, and then it would be the inverse when you come out?
I mean, I don't know, man. Things are kind of fucky.
Isn't that what he said though? When he came out, he was still fucked up.
See, that's what he said. If he was fucked up in
no,
there,
no, but he's saying the other they swapped places. So the one that would have been normally talking in the reverse world came out. So he would be talking the reverse of the reverse.
gotcha. So you were listening to the regular. Ciao, ciao, no, y'all.
All right. Did anyone else have anything that they wanted to hit on in story?
We didn't talk about Darling at all.
Yeah,
I think he's
we
I
should
think he's the
definitely
best
do that.
character in the game. I think he's just interesting. The way they present him is really fun with like the videos recordings, and then like you kind of see him like descending from like corporate, or government, training manual guy to like this whole standing in his boxers and doing, Devo covers in the motel.
Yeah, music
Yep,
videos.
That was amazing.
I walked in, I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? This is unexpected.
Yeah, when he knows the end is coming, it's a very interesting video of him just being like, "Yeah, this is it. Like, I'm not surviving this one."
Yeah, he knows, and like that's what's kind of cool about his character is like he knows the danger. Like, and that's the thing. I think a lot of the control people that work there kind of only half understand the powers that they're kind of playing with, and like I think Darling's the kind of closest one, other than the directors, to kind of understand the magnitude of what they're working on, and I think that makes him kind of in a unique position because he's the only one that really kind of realizes, we could die. All of us could just get murdered by this building at any time, if it chooses to, and it's just interesting. He understands it more than anybody outside of the directors. Well, it's also because they're not allowed to know, right? Control.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
They it's all very need to know basis kind of stuff. So he's like one of the only ones that has access to all this information.
You kind of mentioned it very, very briefly, but the motel I thought was a very cool part of the game. I was confused by it the second time I went there, but then I kind of grew to love how they used it. But out of curiosity, and because I didn't pick up on it, is there, outside of those segments, is there any significance to the motel itself?
I mean, she did mention towards the end, I think it was one of the last times you were in the motel, about where that's the link to different worlds.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed the last time you went in how like she had like, well, not she, but there was like campaign posters of like her on them and like advertisements for Ordinary and stuff like that. So
I missed that.
They were like all over inside.
Huh.
They don't explicitly say this, but I kind of think that it's like an entire building that is an object of power.
I could see that.
I thought they were saying it was a second. What do they call the bureau building?
The oldest house.
Oldest house.
Yeah, I thought it was like a second one that they were discovering.
So I kind of prescribe to the theory that I don't think Darling is dead either. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he's just on a different plane of existence. Like I think he goes into Hedron, and like he kind of ascends to a different plane. He's gone, but I don't think he's dead.
I wish they would have elaborated on, was it Hedron? I thought that was just kind of thrown in at the end without any build-up whatsoever. Is that just me?
Well, it's Polaris
Polaris,
inside of
yeah.
Hedron.
Yes, but I mean, they don't explain Polaris really either. It's just a ghost or an entity that's been following her. But like, I don't know. I wish they would have built like what it actually is, or start telling what it actually is.
What's kind of interesting there is that I kind of think that Polaris is the good guy in the Hiss world. Like, they're the force of good, whereas Hiss are like the force of bad, because Polaris comes out of the slide projector. Well, Polaris escapes first, and then they shut the slide projector down, and the Hiss don't come out until afterward. But they said it was the same thing, and Polaris knows so much about the Hiss that it would that you can draw the conclusion that Polaris is from the same dimension as the Hiss.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily that either Polaris or obviously the Hiss has got some territorial characteristics, but I don't think you can say
A little bit.
I don't think you could say for any account that, Polaris is necessarily good. I think there's a lot of that kind of, not to get into a different genre, but there's a lot of Lovecraftian kind of, you don't know the power that you're messing with here kind of thing. And they wind up summoning, they get Polaris because they're screwing around with this stuff, and Polaris, they contain it to protect it. And then Polaris just wants to get let out, so that it could be, itself again, because it's being contained by the big HRA. I don't necessarily think Polaris or the Hiss are necessarily all good or all bad.
I mean, I didn't necessarily mean that to be like as black and white as good and bad. I just meant that like Polaris isn't trying to necessarily take over fucking everything, whereas the Hiss are obviously just doing what the Hiss does, which is like take over the fucking area and then presumably the world. The only other thing that I wanted to mention before we hop into gameplay, did anyone read into the collectibles and things like that the director before Trench is the nuclear reactor?
Yep, he is.
Yeah, I did not get that deep into it.
Yeah, he went like overboard on trying to like gain power over and over and over again, and then they had to contain him, and then they realized that they could use him as sustainable energy, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. That's
awesome. So he became Simple Rick. Simple.
Yeah,
Ricks.
I mean, kind of. That's why it's like it's like the something containment unit, and it's like his last name because he's in there. It's just like they built this reactor around him. It's wild. It's really great at those world building kind of details. That's what I like about the story of this game, is that kind of stuff.
Speaking of the world building, this was the last bullet point I wanted to talk on. But the zombie-like creatures that you encountered, I thought if anything felt out of place, it was them. They were surrounded with the, I guess the mold that was growing.
Yeah.
And the mold kind of fits into like the theme of this game, but I thought the zombie creatures that kind of came out of it, it didn't fit for me personally.
I blew through that part so fast because like I realized you could just jump the thing. Like you didn't have to actually turn the turnstile. You could just jump it.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's move on into some gameplay.
Gameplay.
I'll go first. I started this game hating the combat, which I was kind of disappointed with because I love third-person shooter type games, and like I couldn't get into a groove until I unlocked the Pierce gun, and I like started comboing because like the Pierce only had like 2 shots, like it was like charged like shots. I used that in combination with like the throw, and it was just like fucking game on from there, and I fucking loved it.
Gotcha. See, I do have some of the same feelings about like the combat in the very beginning until I unlocked the telekinesis. And that's when it was like, okay, now it's getting real. Now I can like start getting into it.
Yeah, once you get a few powers under your belt, this game really opens up in terms of however you want to play it. You kind of can tackle any task the way that you want. Because I went like almost full energy build. Like I maxed out my energy, I maxed out my launch damage and my evade damage, and I was just using abilities left and right, and that was most of the stuff that I would do. I would use I guess spin is the construct form of the gun that is like the machine gun,
little mini gun.
Use that to just melt armor off of people, and then just launch something into them, destroy them, and pick up their dead body and throw it at another enemy and shit like that, and just create unlimited ammo for myself.
Now, I think that's a good lead in. Like, what was everybody's build? Like, what did you kind of use as your structure for like battle or like more defense using shield? Like, what did everybody put themselves into?
I did full throwing damage and mostly full health. And then toward the end, I started increasing the length of time that I could control or take over people. I forget what it was actually called.
Seize.
Yeah, Seize. Yep. Yeah, so I had like 3 tiers into Seize at the end, I think, too.
Okay. What was your main gun or gun configurations?
My Pierce, and then I had mods, and I had like 180% bonus damage while aiming.
Oh shit.
Yeah, like there was like the rank 4 mods were like insane for aiming down sights, which with the Pierce having only 2 bullets, like you always aim down sights and it would just fucking wreck.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, anytime you come across the absolute mods, like that was key.
Yeah, I ran Pierce, Spin, and just mostly launch damage, like I was saying. I did mess around with Seize a little bit. I didn't really do the shielding stuff or any of the melee, because I thought the melee was real weak.
Yeah, I didn't do much of the melee personally. I balanced everything in the beginning of the game, and then I got to that one boss and got fucked, like real bad.
Which boss was that?
In the red room, where he's hanging from the
Security?
ceiling, and then as soon,
Head
I
of
think
security.
so.
Yeah.
I forget the guy's name.
He like floats around and shoots shit at you.
It's just
Yeah.
a big square. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
So I had to reconfigure all of my stats and put it all into telekinesis energy. I eventually maxed out the shield, where that whenever you put up the shield, you gain your energy back over time, which is kind of key. And I primarily use the shotgun for firearm.
Oh, the shatter.
Shatter, yes.
Yeah.
So I used launch pretty much exclusively, because once that's maxed out on damage, it's insane, and you really don't have to do much.
Yep.
You really don't have to do much else. Most encounters would just be use launch as much as I could to throw shit at people, and then finish anything off that's left with the pistol, and then my energy would be recharged, and I'd throw more shit at things. I mean, I used levitation a lot because a lot of the enemies just couldn't shoot straight when you were in the air, oddly enough. So, like, if you just floated around, they would just miss you. So I'd float around and I'd throw shit at things because you'd have better angles when you were floating anyway. I think I used spin, and I think I used shatter.
Were there any enemy types that you guys like absolutely hated? I know Harry said he didn't like the zombies, but like were there any that you like really hated going against?
I didn't mind the invisible. At the very beginning, like when I first met them and didn't understand the technique to beat them, that was difficult. The ones that I really kind of had some trouble with, for I would say about 3/4 of the game, were I don't know the best way to put it, like the vampire looking flying dudes who would have
that dodge the launch attack.
Right. Yeah, and not the guy in
There's
the
my
chair,
least favorite too.
because there's the one that floats around the chair, but you're able to hit them a little easier. But the ones who are just free floating, that was the biggest pain in the ass, and that's why at least because I was like pretty much all of you guys, my main thing was using launch, and then I would have the grip, which is just the straight pistol, and then shatter for the close-up damage. And I got lucky on some of the mods where I had like tier 5 or tier 6, whatever the top one is, and I just try to throw everything into that. But then I would also use Seize a good bit, just so I could convert 2 guys and they could just be like fodder for the gunfire that comes in. And then once I get one of the flying guys down low enough, I would snag him real quick, because then it's what Joe was talking about, or John, where it's just the levitate and they can't shoot in a straight line, so you have someone going back and forth, so that way they're drawing the fire, but they're not necessarily dying as fast. But up until the very end, I mean, those flying dudes were a pain in the ass. And Harry, you're not alone. I also had to reset all of my skills by a certain point because I realized I only put 1 into health, and I was wondering why I was dying so much. Then I looked at my skill tree. I'm like, oh, well, that's why. That needs to change. So once I changed my loadout when it come to the skill tree, it was like easy peasy lemon squeezy by that point.
Yeah, so
I don't think I had a problem with anything in particular. Like the guy Steve said was when I found out that I really loved the Pierce, because one shot on those guys actually like stunned, and then you could still launch and hit them.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't,
nice.
They couldn't dodge the launch if you hit them with the Pierce first. So they were, I hit him with the Pierce once, launch one object, they were dead. There was no follow-up after that ever with those guys. The only ones that I had trouble with were the ones that like threw a shit ton of grenades or rockets, because I didn't put enough points into energy to continuously grab them and throw them back. So I had to still do a lot of like running around away from them when I didn't have enough energy to just catch them midair.
Gotcha. I mean, once you like start working through an area a little bit and you die a couple times, like at least I did, and then there's the ones who were either launching the rockets or the big dudes who would shoot the grenade and they stick in the ground, and then as long as you had the skill put into it where you can take it up and launch it back at them.
Yeah, that's what I had.
That was it. It was marvelous once you actually started learning to work it to your advantage and not just running around like a chicken with its head cut off.
Yep.
Yeah, so for me, it's the invisible guy, but it's only in one situation. So that head of security, like the first real boss that you fight that Harry had trouble with, you can fight him again. So he's near ordinary. So it's like after you beat the area, though, you have to go back. It's like a side mission to go get him. And then you have to fight that boss, but like when he gets to half health, he starts spawning those guys. So you can't like hide behind cover. And those guys are just constantly like dropping you down to 1 health. And it's just absolutely brutal.
But at least with those invisible dudes, like once you start getting the pattern down, like you can kind of see like the rainbow kind of like prism effect, like moving around, you can throw something at it, which will make them become visible again, and then just quick throw up a shield absorbs it, and then I would just drop the shield and just shatter.
Yeah, I mean, they're not hard to kill necessarily individually, but the problem is when you're fighting Salvador, he's like throwing shit at you constantly and harassing you, and you have to pay attention because if you get hit by his thrown stuff, you're in trouble. So then they just sneak up on you, and it's just like, it's the worst. The second fight with Salvador, I think, is probably the hardest boss in the game.
I don't know about you guys, but I died a lot in this game. Like, a fucking lot. And some of it was because, well, I was low health for such a long time. Another part of it was because I was not spatially aware. Like, when you have to raise the siphons, like the satellite dishes for Hadron at the very end, I kept running around and then just falling off the side and then dropping to my death. Or the one with the refrigerator, because the boss is just like a giant eye, and he would shoot shit at you and you can catch it, throw it back, and then every once in a while he would do a physical attack where he lunges at you and hits you and takes out a chunk in the ground. So I'm up looking at his giant fucking eyeball, trying to shoot him in the iris, and then I just run to the left and drop through a fucking hole. And every single time I was like, son of a bitch, not again.
It was like a random little tiny, slightly darker gray hole in the middle of the platform. And it's just like, oh, you didn't see it? Sorry, you're dead. Try again.
Well, the problem with that is you're looking up at the enemy. You're not looking down at the ground.
That was annoying. No, it wasn't just you.
Did everybody go over their enemies? Because I had a couple bullet points of things that I had gripes with.
Sure, go ahead.
So one thing, now you guys can debate me on this, but I think this game could have benefited from a like a spin, or what's it called, where you like hold a button, you could pick a weapon. Is that like a spin dial or
like a weapon wheel?
yes, like yeah. I think this game could have way benefited from a
See, I'm going to disagree a little bit.
I didn't like having just two weapons equipped and having to go in the menu whenever you want to swap them out, because the menu, getting out of the menu repeatedly was atrocious, where the game would just like slow down to a screeching halt for like 5 to 10 seconds.
Oh, see, I didn't have that problem getting in and out of like the ability and mission menu, but if I were to pause, like actually hit like option, or I guess what would be start, then there would be some lag time getting back in, but going in and out of like the weapon screen, I didn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I
Which
didn't have a problem with any of that either.
which was going to be one of my things. It's like where I found if I need to go up to like go to the bathroom or get a drink or something, I had to make sure, like in my own mind, I was hitting the touchpad to actually pause, so that way I wouldn't have to wait to get back in, and it wouldn't all be like jagged and laggy loading back into the game again.
I don't know. It just, as fast paced as some of this game was, I didn't like to have to hop in the menu to swap weapons if something wasn't being effective. I don't know, it just really slowed down the game for me.
Did you guys actually swap weapons? Because once I built the Pierce, I never swapped back.
No, there was a couple where being like as other than grip, because I just kept the pistol like the whole time. Going from shatter, the shotgun, and then I would change that over to charge, like the little grenade launcher,
Yeah.
and going back and forth and be able to switch mid battle, I liked. Because there were a couple times like in this game, I kind of got like a little bit of a Mass Effect feel. But I liked being able to change my loadout mid battle or any time where it wasn't like blocked out. I didn't have to start a mission at the very beginning. So I did like that about it. And then not to go off on this tangent since we're talking about weapons and enemies, but I kind of wish the dialogue options were more like Mass Effect, because I just want to be able to skip through because I can read faster than they're talking, and I just want to get to the next one, and you would just have to skip past the entire dialogue just to end it.
That's funny. I never, like, now that you're talking about it, I remember switching back to the grip mid combat, and what killed it for me was when I realized that all the ammo was shared between weapons. Like when you depleted like your capacity on one weapon and then swapped over, you still had to wait for it to recharge anyway. So I was like, what the fuck is the point?
Well,
like, instead of swapping, I'll just start throwing, and then that became fucking OP almost anyway, so I just went with it.
Well,
Yeah.
that kind of brings me to my next gripe.
all right.
He's got a lot of problems with you people.
It was a simple. So the combat was fun. I'm not gonna lie. I think they could have elaborated on some of the powers a bit. Like, I think it was like, why do we need like 8 or 9 tiers on one power? Maybe 3 or 4, but like add a couple additional powers. Like, I felt like even by the end of the game, the combat was kind of basic. Yes, you had a couple more abilities at this point, but it wasn't a ton of different stuff. You could do a sprint burst, you can hover, you can take over some people, you could throw stuff, but like,
I think there's a couple points to that. So the longer tree makes sense to me because you see more gradual progression with something. So you're not just like, put 1 point into it, you gain 25% damage. Like, you put 1 point in, you get 10, and then there's 10 slots. Like, it's more gradual progression that way, which, like, I feel you feel more rewarded because you can get the upgrades more frequently. So I think that's okay. And then on top of that, it also creates build diversity, right? Obviously, that we all talked about it. The throw is ridiculous, right? But like, you talked about the shield, I went like full HP. Other than that, like, I'm sure like you could make a build with the jump, glide, move, whatever the fuck that is. Like, that was like a skill tree too.
Like the evade.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you could still have build diversity with it, and I would not be surprised if you still gain attributes with the DLC.
Possibly. I don't know. It just wasn't enough for me personally. I thought it was just too simple. Because I mean, I know you're talking diversity with the builds, but let's say you did focus on like the evasion aspect, where you max out your hover time, the ground pound, and I guess the dash. I still think you're going to be relying on your guns and then a weak telekinetic power at that point. Like it's still gonna like that's still your main damage output is the telekinesis and guns.
I think if you were dashing and ground pounding and things like that, you'd also start meleeing, which is something we didn't use.
Right. And I mean, just to counter you there, Harry, I mean, you're saying that you feel the way that it's too simple, but what you described, what you wanted, where it's just more direct and like, at least like my assumption, where it just sounds like you only want like 3 to 5 categories. That feels like it makes it more simple than.
No, I want more categories like that. That's what I'm saying. I think if they're gonna give a person powers, why only do a couple and call it a game? Fucking go nuts on it.
Well, I mean, they had like 7 to 9 skill trees that you could start going down.
Yeah, and they all had like their tiered like offshoot things to like sees you could gain additional people or like
exactly going down launch. You can just go straight down launch all the way, and then like 2 rungs down, you can go launch, and then that's where you can start throwing rockets back at people, or then to start throwing people, or then throw a large thing. Exactly.
I know you guys are really trying to sell me on this, but I was not impressed. I just wasn't.
No. That's fine. I'm not going to tell you what's done is done. I'm just saying it's like if you're saying you want more, I think they had enough in there where if like
and I'm saying not.
Harry's not satisfied until there's 20 attributes to throw down in there. Just go.
Absolutely.
Pretty sure you started this asking.
How dare they not make their action game a fucking full blown RPG?
Here's an example. I think I know what Harry's saying. He's just terrible at expressing his emotions. So
it's okay. Harry's allowed to have his opinion.
I guess just not enough variety. Because I was thinking maybe they could have put passive abilities in. That might have just tickled what I was trying to get at. I don't know.
So not just over like just control or seize, where you just like take over someone's mind, but where you don't necessarily have to kill them, or just something more to boost up your.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, maybe a passive that when they're done they explode or something like that.
Okay,
I don't know.
I got you.
I'm just saying, like it just seemed rinse and repeat in certain battles. That's
that's because I think
You're
that
not
there
wrong.
wasn't enough, depth to the combat. There were plenty of powers, but they were all so simple. Like you couldn't even really, unless you really took the time to aim, like at what you were grabbing, it would just grab a random chunk of rock out of like a wall and throw it at the guys. I would have loved it if it would have like.
No, it would.
Right.
Oh,
So I would have
didn't
loved it if there was a chance like that when you grabbed a random thing because you weren't aiming, it just grabbed like a teddy bear and it threw the teddy bear and it just bounces off and it doesn't do anything. Like, because why do you know that you're grabbing something big and heavy? Like, grab something light, Oh, you threw a balloon at him. That's nice. Like, because it would reward you for taking the time to pick the right object. Like, pick the explosive barrel to shoot at the enemy. Right? It's depth. It's depth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that the way that they gave out or presented the combat system, and it would even tell you on the screen, the loading screens, like in between you died, don't stand still, just keep moving and just keep going. So it's just like just move and hit a button, and then it just goes. So I could see where,
that kind of works towards my argument on the gun system too. Just keep moving, as in keep the combat flowing, and then boom, you got to stop, go in the menu, grab the guns. My last point on that one, I'll back off on that one now. But the last thing I wanted to talk about, so earning the points to level up your character. I really wanted to max all of her abilities out. And I did all the side quests did every point achievable through like little missions and everything. And then I reached a wall. I hit a wall where the only way you can unlock points at that point is by finding all the secret locations in the game. And I lost interest real quick. I think it had to do with this environment. I love the environment, but it wasn't as fun to explore as it was for like Doom. Or like, because finding like the hidden areas in that. I loved searching every nook and cranny in that game. Or when we were playing Prey, I loved searching every little area of that game. But this, I didn't feel intrigued to go look into every crevice to find these hidden points. And I think I only found 2 the entire playthrough, just casually coming across them.
Well, we know you're not good casually coming across crevices, but that's a whole nother story. But I am glad you I am glad you said something about that, though, because usually with these type of games, I like to complete most of the side missions and then tackle the main. But with not rationing my time appropriately, I focused on the main and did like a couple side missions. So to hear that you can't actually max out the skill tree without having to get like the secret stuff, and not just from the missions or even like a couple of the collectibles, that's kind of disappointing.
That's funny. I'm the like complete opposite of that. I enjoy games where it makes like forces you to make decisions on how you play your game. Games where they're like, okay, here you go, and then like you just get everything, like obviously with a little bit of work, they're less enjoyable because like some of they end up designing the game expecting you to do it, like, and you don't have to really make decisions about where you're spending your points and all of that kind of stuff. Like I like there to be like repercussions. Like if you fuck up, like Harry said, and like he spread all his points out across everything, like, well, your character's going to be kind of shit and you're going to die a lot and you're not going to do a lot of damage and you rebuild. You know what I mean? Like I enjoy that part. Like to optimize basically.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think builds in games like this are actually like really important to the combat experience in and of itself. So early on in the game, I was kind of messing around with the I settled into the launch build that I ended up the game with. However, the shield that tosses back projectiles and you can dash, hit enemies, and do meleeing and stuff, that is a totally viable build in this too. Launch is not the only way to play this game. I think that's why they have the respec in there, is to try out different things and see what works. Because the whole levitate, dodge, dash, ground pound, and shield is totally viable, and it's actually kind of fun to do. You just need to make sure that you have max energy to do it because it is resource heavy. But I agree with Joe. I think that having to make tough decisions like that is important. There's a reason that like games like Diablo don't allow you to have all of the skills for your character. It's because it forces you to make tough decisions to play a certain style that you want to play.
Gotcha.
All right, guys, let's move on into graphics.
Graphics.
Garbage.
What?
Just kidding.
Joe's a hot take machine.
Well, there's one thing that really bothered me with the graphics, and that was the characters when they spoke.
I was going to wait for that. I didn't know whether to say that during this or sound.
Yeah, I know, but at least just like it's more graphically for me. When they had Jesse speaking, it seemed very refined, like on point with like the mouth movements and whatnot. And the one that really stood out to me was Pope. Yep. When she would speak and just say anything with like an A in it, her mouth just like open, wide open. Like it was just ready to absorb all of the energy around it. It's like, what the hell is going on? And then I thought it was just her. And then I saw it with the, what is it?
Kirby's and AWE.
Yeah, it's, you know what? it really didn't seem too far off. Like it bothered me.
Yeah, some of the character models are a little rough in this.
Yeah, like you said, they spent a ton of time on Jesse, and then like they were like, clock's ticking, guys, and then like rushed everything else.
Yeah.
I'd love it
Like-
if it was like PS1.
It was like
like just
Pope-
PS1 graphics. Like
But the other thing I wanted to say about Pope is that right from the beginning, she reminded me of fucking Skeletor from Doom, whatever that chick was. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
The lady with the exoskeleton. Like from the first meeting her and like the shape of her character model, like I was like, why am I putting this together? But yeah, like even their movements in these dialogue sequences, not just their mouth, but like their arm movements and everything, like they were very steppy and not smooth, like they were very robotic. It was really jarring.
All except Jesse.
Right.
That's just where
Right.
the emphasis was put into all of the character was just Jesse. Otherwise, like, they're there. Who cares?
That's a pretty notorious thing for Remedy as a whole. I think we had the same issues with Max Payne 3, actually.
That is a possibility.
I think the game is actually pretty gorgeous. I love the level design, and I think that like the lighting effects are just like top notch. The particle effects are really good too, like just the little, crumbly bits and stuff like that. How like dirty it looks at times. I really think they knocked it out of the park in terms of that. Now, whether your console or PC can handle that stuff is a completely different story, because there's definitely some graphical lag in different places, but I actually think the game itself is pretty gorgeous.
If you play on a pretty high-end PC with a like a newer graphics card, they're actually one of the first games to do real-time ray tracing, which I looked up. They had like side-by-side comparisons between like console and PC. It's basically like, I guess, reflections of the light in real time, so it's not like
Right.
pre-rendered or anything. So I got a little crash course on education with reflections and everything on a PC today. So, but no, I think that would have been cool to see on console. Unfortunately, I know the hardware can't support that, but
It's also proprietary to NVIDIA, so good luck with that.
Yeah. Well, I would even say with playing on the console, the lighting was something that did stand out, because I think they did a pretty good job for what they were working with in that. And then I know, like with the PS5 press conference, and when they were going through and showing the more advanced lighting that they can do, compared to that, I still think it looked pretty well done. And I'll just first think of again, where you have to raise the siphons, like that was something where there's like one source of light and it's coming through, and if something's in the way, it's a little darker, and the way it's gradient into becoming more light in where it's like an unobstructed view. I liked it. I thought, other than the character models, like it was well done.
Agreed.
I'm thinking overall as a game, just my perspective, I would say, is looking at it from a PS4 perspective, I would say this is like an average looking game. I don't think it's on a bottom level, and I don't think it's on an upper level. I think it's
it's very ordinary on PS4. It's very ordinary, in my opinion.
I mean, I played on PC, and it was better than any PS4 game I ever played. Like, not even close. But yeah, I mean, I played on PC, and it was, like I said, it was a gorgeous game. Better than any PS4 game that I've played to date. Again, like lighting and like rooms and all that stuff. Like especially like the one room that really stood out to me was the really open room with the staircases that kind of spiraled.
Okay, that was like kind of, it felt like a centralized location where there were like 3 or 4 different levels
It's
going
like
up
the main
there.
room of the research portion of the building.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That room was like amazing because of all the different areas you could go to and the sun coming in the top and all the shadows, because like there were always enemies coming from all different directions. That room was always like ridiculous every time I went into it.
Yeah, I think from a art design standpoint, the decision making they made with the locations is actually kind of brilliant. We talked a little bit about brutalist architecture and government buildings and the banality of corporate design, but when you talk about how ordinary, for lack of a better word, or how boring your typical office space is, what I think that art direction gives you is that when you see things that are weird, it makes them pop even more. So like, the first time you see one of those giant stone bunkers that everybody can run into, right? And you're like, what is that thing for? Yeah, nobody was ever in them, but yeah, the shelter, right? You're like, why? What are those? Yeah, what are those for? Like, or you start seeing like the weird kind of out of the ordinary design kind of stuff that the objects of power or the altered items kind of bring into the world. It kind of makes everything else, it makes those weird things pop better because everything else is so ordinary looking and so boring, for lack of a better term. And I think that was a conscious decision on their part, because they wanted this, I think they wanted this setting to feel like it was something that they have been doing for, years. Like they've just been dealing with the same bullshit at the Bureau of Control, and they're just trying to deal with it. But it's not, now we got this hiss thing that we're trying to deal with, and nobody realized until it was too late how bad that thing really was, right? Or how dangerous that thing really was.
I do like how they kind of took the like main environment you were in and deconstructed it for the astral plane. I think that was still done well, because it was blocky. It, of course, it was a little more jagged and, some more pillars and some depths that kind of went into it, but it still kind of kept the same feel for the most part, but just obviously different since you're entering a whole nother realm, basically.
One section of the game that really sticks out to me, well, there's two actually, is the pit, like where everything's like made out of obsidian,
like the quarry.
Yeah, the quarry, that's it, the Black Rock Quarry. Like I thought that area was just fantastic, and then you look up and it's just like an aurora above you and things like that. Like I thought that really stood out. And did any of you do the stoplight?
Yes, I did.
No.
When you're jumping through all of the different things for the stoplight, I thought that area was so cool, because it's just it's like the walls are closing in and they're spiraling around, and you kind of look like you're going through like some of like the James Bond intro, like the barrel of the gun and stuff like that. You kind of like travel through different architecture that looks like that, and I think that kind of design is really intricate and very well designed. And like John was saying, like there's certain elements that draw your eye. I feel like the art direction in here kind of takes a page out of like the Sin City art style, where it's like, okay, everything's kind of black and white and drab, and then there's like, boom, there's something red or there's something yellow, and it just immediately pulls your eye to it. And like I think that kind of played into the graphics here and design. All right, guys, let's dodge our way into sound.
Audio.
Let's talk about the Ashtray Maze and how important like music is in that specific part.
Poets of the Fall. This is the highlight of the game, I want to say, besides the fridge, because the fridge is fucking awesome. But I like how, so the key to getting through the maze was the music. You couldn't make it through without the song that you had to pick up from Ati. So we should mention Poets of the Fall. They are friends of the Remedy team. They go by the name the Old Gods of Asgard in this world. But then the song titled Control, this segment, which I think was the best sound in the game. It's on my Spotify playlist.
Oh, really?
Same.
That song does kind of slap though.
It's a door.
Fuck you.
Yeah, so I mean that area is one of the, I think the best designed kind of set pieces in the game. You know, it's linear, but it never feels, it feels like you're in a state of total chaos the entire time. The world's changing around you, stuff's popping out of everywhere. You know, it's like fractal at certain points. The walls are just going crazy, and then, you know, it's very like psychedelic. And, you know, it was one of those things, like, you could tell the developers, like, you know, were like totally like, yeah, we nailed this, because even after the segment's over and you get through, right, Jesse, the only thing, like, the best thing she says in the whole game is, like, she was like, that was awesome. And like that was like the best thing she could have done, right? Because it was like they knew when they were putting that together, like, yeah, we got this kick-ass song and we got this kick-ass area design, and it's going to be like crazy, and it lasts just as long as the song, and it's like perfect, you know? And it's like it was really well done comparatively to.
You hit a very important point though, John. They had a very intended pace through this section, and if you're going too slow or too fast, the song will not match up with what portion of the maze you're in. Because I just noticed, like, the song would slow down at certain points, and it felt like it should have slowed down, and then it ramps up when, like, certain enemies pop out, or when, like, all those enemies are behind those doors, and then you just see the wall come down and block them. All of us, like the song seemed to match exactly what was happening on the screen at any given moment through that.
Yeah, I mean, it was totally a set piece. You know, it was like it's like a Call of Duty game when you're like going through, and, you know, it's all very orchestrated at that point. But, you know, it doesn't mean you don't enjoy it. You know, it was a really well designed part of the game, and even though it was, you know, not totally linear, you still kind of could see the directions they wanted you to go. The pacing was really perfect. I think it's the best part of the whole game.
Sound in general for pretty much the other 90% of the game was not great. As we kind of alluded to earlier, not only was like the voice off with the animations, but like the dialogue delivery with most characters was just pretty poor, and was just hard to get through. Darlings was okay, because like it kind of made sense with his character, that he was like he seemed very standoffish at first and things like that. But like, again, if like you're a scientist and like somebody just puts a camera in front of you, you're not going to be like comfortable, right? So that kind of made sense for me. But like, again, Pope, Marshall, all those guys, like their dialogue delivery was very robotic still.
When you hit the button on the projectors for like Darling, so he could, you know, talk, if you walked around the room, it was like placed as an object in the room, so you would actually see it get quieter. And then if you walk closer, you would hear it. So it made you want to stick around in the room because you wanted to hear clearly what he was talking about. And you could watch him through the menu after you unlocked him if you really wanted to get a good look at it. I just like that it was like a real thing. It wasn't just like an overlaid voice. You know, it had spatial awareness.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, the only one who really like shine through a little bit was Langston. Like, that's the only one that felt like when you were talking it, I don't want to say it felt genuine, but it sounded more on par for what you would expect, and the rest just seemed a little more robotic. I mean, except for Ati, but he just has his own personality anyway.
I mean, the sound effects are fine, but the music on that one scene was perfect.
Small little Easter egg here. Hideo Kojima had a cameo voice log somewhere in the game with his English translator as well.
Oh, dude.
I don't know exactly which document it was. I don't think I picked that one up, but I did read that online earlier today.
All right, are you guys ready to move into final thoughts?
Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Harry, go ahead.
Sure. I think it was a fun game. Like I said, I think there's some things that fell short, some things that excelled. I think the best way to wrap up my thoughts of this game is it's a game that they strived as like a AAA title, and it just fell short.
All right, Steve, go ahead.
I mean, this is this is a game that you can get lost in for a good bit because there's so many things to do between collectibles, side missions, and then the random like executive missions that pop up. It is a bit lackluster. We've definitely covered more exciting, in-depth games than this, but also at the same point, this is something I could see myself going through the DLC and still wanting that little bit extra just to see where the story goes. So I mean, it piqued enough interest to have me put some more money into it once it comes.
All right. How about you, Joe?
I had a good time with it. I'm looking forward to spending some time with the DLC. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, when I first started it, I didn't really like it at first until I found the groove of the combat that like fit my play style. And once I did, it was pretty much game over and hard to put down at that point.
All right. How about you, John?
So, like, imagine if you had like a building or your house or a store or something, and you like it. You know, it's a great place. You know, it's a place that you really enjoy. But then, you know, somebody decides to just put a bag of trash outside of it and leave it outside of the outside of this place. And, you know, you go, well, who would do this? Who could do such a thing to ruin such a perfect environment? You know, so you open it and you try and figure it out, and you find these pieces of paper and scraps, and you put it all together, and it says Jesse Faden, and you go, man, I don't know who this Jesse Faden character is, but she's kind of ruining my store right now, you know, and that to me. So you call people and you try and figure out, you know, how does this work, you know, and you don't get anywhere, you know. So at the end of the day, you just throw the trash out, and you just wind up making, you know, the best of it. But to me, this game is a beautiful building with a bag of trash characters.
All right. I think this is actually a pretty excellent game, and I'm very curious to see where they're going to go in the future with it, especially with the new DLC coming out, and I'm very, very anxious to dive into the next DLC. All right, let's move into the score.
The score.
All right, Joe, go ahead.
This game played a lot to my preferences. I'm gonna give it an 80%.
All right, Steve.
I too with Joe. It played to my preferences. Redheads just flying around throwing shit at people. So I would have to. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a B-.
Harry.
This is going to tie with everything else. I'm going to give it a 4.0. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to give it a 7.0. And this is going to tie with Metal Gear Solid 2 and Silent Hill 3.
I think that's the highest rating you've given in like
Look at you
6
using
months.
the updated score sheet.
Yeah, I am. I have it up on my screen right now.
At least someone put that in front of his face. Thank you, Joe.
All right, John.
I give it a solid 7 out of 10.
All right, and I actually think this is a buy. I think this is definitely worth it.
There you go. You don't get too many of those.
No, it's pretty rare for me.
Yeah.
Well, all right, guys. Tune in 2 weeks, and we will have a new Mubbers for you. And
Mubbers. Oh, early.
And yeah.
Premature Mubbers.
So stay lovely.
Mubber.
Stay sexy.
Love you guys.
Stay safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on social media and all streaming platforms at Superfun Podcast for more episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend about us and consider becoming a Patreon member for more exclusive content.